So, traditional Jewish, Christian, or Muslim. To understand.
Atheist and agnostic as well as...
Hi, Kate.
I feel like you were divinely inspired for this episode.
I feel inspired. I don't know if it all is divine.
Well, you took this episode in a direction I didn't think you were going to take. On today's episode of
The Holy Watermelon Podcast. Well, yeah, I left the initial subject line pretty nebulous, and it took me a while to figure out what to do with it.
Well, and then I popped into the notes and was pleasantly surprised. So it's been like, I don't know, 3 years since we've done a pop culture episode. We did a pop culture episode really early on.
Yeah, it was really early on.
Like episode 4 or 5, if you want to go way back into the archives.
I think we called it Jesus of the Silver Screen.
We did.
Yeah.
And so we're like, it's time to do another one. And Preston took the initiative, decided to do one on spooky movies.
Cult classics.
Cult classics.
If you don't like spoilers, this episode might not be for you. But we're not going to spoil too much for those of you who are still looking to add good movies to your watch list. But really, we're focused on those movies that are focused on the spookiest religious behaviors. The cult classics.
Cult classics, yeah. Movies, they're all, scary movies with religious or cult undertones. Or overtones, let's be honest. Some of these are very...
very culty.
Yeah.
So these movies are generally classified as horror films. Some lean into fear. And I feel it's important to highlight the difference between these two things.
Elaborate?
Fear is rooted primarily in anticipation of the unknown. And so this is some movies, but not all horror movies fit that description. Fright is your jump scare stuff, typically described as being a matter of surprise. This is what fright is. Terror is the kind of fear that causes panic, is where phobia lives. And then we've got horror, which is more rooted in disgust or even hatred. So while the Saw movies have some jump scares, they are horrifying all the way through.
Right. Which is why the one movie I've seen on this list, when we get to it, people probably not be shocked, is The Village, because it's not gory.
Right.
I can handle the suspense. I can't handle gore, which is why I generally don't watch horror movies, because you couldn't pay me to watch Saw.
Okay. I enjoy the Saw franchise.
I know
I'm a little bit behind, unfortunately. Life happens, but I'm going to get caught up.
You might be horrified to find your cat has brought you a dead bird, but that won't likely be a good reason for fear unless the bird is huge.
Yeah, if your cat can take down an ostrich, maybe you should be afraid of your cat. I've been into horror movies for decades now. And so often I hear people go, well, it's a horror movie, but it wasn't scary. Well, yeah, because you're not focusing on what horror really is.
Right. And even, as you know, I'm a big fan of Chris Evans, if you're listening. Come on the podcast. He did Sunshine years ago, which is considered a thriller, but it's not horrifying.
Sure.
Honestly, it's not even that scary, but it's based on things like the anticipation.
Sure.
Which is why I like M Night Shyamalan, because his movies aren't gory, they're just suspenseful.
Suspenseful, and I mean, his whole thing for a long time was twist endings. Yeah. Which we'll talk a little bit about later on.
But that's why I've always leaned to him, because they were safe horror movies, because they were never going to be gory or super gory. There's a few moments, but nothing like Saw.
Right.
Where you have to saw your own leg off. I wouldn't even watch the one with James Franco, based on the true story, where the guy, 167 hours or whatever. I
think it's 127?
Sure, whatever.
I don't know. Yeah, number not important. You'll find it. I mean, honestly...
Did you watch it?
The premise just didn't feel like it was going to be worth it.
Have you watched it?
No.
Okay.
What I know about it is dude gets trapped.
Has to saw his own arm off.
There's no way that's thrilling to me.
No, but again...
I have to assume there's a lot of flashbacks.
Yes.
Okay, good.
He self-reflects on his,
Good, because that movie could be so boring.
And obviously has to make a really hard decision. But, I don't want to watch that scene where he cuts it. Good for the real guy who did it. Well done. I probably would have just died in the desert. Good on you. But I don't want to watch it. Anyway, I've digressed. digressed quite considerably. Katie doesn't like gore is the thesis of this. Take it away, Preston.
All right. So the first movie on our list is The Wicker Man, which is more than one movie. We'll get into that. So it's actually based on a 1967 novel called Ritual.
Interesting.
Edward Woodward. There's too many words
Yeah, that's
in that name. Edward Woodward and Christopher Lee starred in the first film, The Wicker Man, in 1973, directed by Robin Hardy. Robin Hardy's important. We'll talk about him a little bit more later. But I think it's really interesting. Christopher Lee says this is his best movie. The man was in close to 300 films,
including great hits like Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings, Star Wars. He
yeah.
played Dracula so much.
Right.
He played Frankenstein's monster. He was all over the place. He was the man with the golden gun in James Bond. A lot of great films. A lot of kind of ridiculous action films. But this one, The Wicker Man, he says was his best.
Wow.
So if you haven't seen it yet, you should.
Okay. I haven't.
A novelization of the film that was based on a book was published in 1978, 5 years after the movie came out. It feels weird having a novelization of a movie that's based on a book already, but it is. The movie is sufficiently different from the original book that this new book is worth making as its own thing.
You know what it's like? Wizard of Oz the book was made into Wizard of Oz the movie, and then they wrote Wicked the book, and then they made Wicked the musical.
Yeah,
and now they're making the movie Wicked.
And it just keeps getting further and further from the
original. So now they're going to make the movie Wicked, so I presume that means there's either going to be another book or stage musical.
Right. Do you know how many Wizard of Oz books there are?
There are more, yeah.
There's more than 40 of them.
Yeah.
Most of them are in the public domain, which means you can do whatever you please. I have to believe they're not very good, though, because everybody's adapting the original and nothing else.
Yes, I did know that it was like a collection of works, and I was like, oh, I should read other ones, but my to-read list is 350 books long.
Yeah, that's the life of a reader. In 2006, Nicolas Cage starred in a remake, which is very similar in a lot of the important ways, enough for it to be a remake, but there's a few important differences. They moved the story from Scotland. It's in one of the islands to the west of Scotland's mainland, and they take it to a little island off the west coast of Washington. Move it over a whole continent. And, I mean, it works pretty well, fits for an American audience that doesn't care about Scotland. I think they overestimate how important that is to the audience. But Robin Hardy did not love the remake, the director of the original. So in 2011, Robin Hardy directed a new film called The Wicker Tree, which isn't actually a sequel to the original Wicker Man movie that he did, but he calls it a spiritual successor. For those of you who are into film, it's like a sequel, but not. And instead of having a dude who kind of stumbles into this situation that he doesn't like, or, a cop who is dragged into it, we have a couple of Christian missionaries who visit a cult in Scotland specifically to bring them Christianity.
Well,
it does not work.
No.
And there's actually been a whole bunch of attempts to make this story of the Wicker Man into a stage play.
Weird.
None of them have panned out yet, as far as I'm aware.
I feel like, as a musical fan, I feel like a horror has to be written for the stage, not adapted. Like Sweeney Todd.
Sure.
Was written for the stage.
That's
I feel
fair.
like it's very hard to, I don't know. I'm not a writer, but that feels like a difficult thing to transpose into stage.
Well, so you're not familiar with the story. I'll walk you through it a little bit. So both films, The Wicker Man, follow a man who travels to a relatively isolated island where a young girl has gone missing. The locals deny that she ever existed, which is odd because somebody has made a complaint that this girl has gone missing. There is evidence here and there that this person existed, but everybody is just gaslighting the main character real hard. The protagonist won't stop harassing locals until he gets to the bottom of this disappearance, and which is all, of course, a ruse. They're gaslighting him. to prepare the protagonist to be killed in a giant wooden effigy as a sacrifice.
The Wicker Man.
Yeah. And it's all about appeasing the fertility goddess and ensuring that they have good crops.
Nice.
Yeah, it's great. In both Robin Hardy films, his original and then The Wicker Tree, virginity of the sacrifice is actually super important. I don't think Nicolas Cage has ever consented to play a virgin.
Probably not.
I haven't gone and checked his whole IMDb page to make sure, but it feels like he probably hasn't.
Nicolas Cage is almost as prolific as Christopher Lee.
He's
with over
trying.
200 movies to his name.
And he's not about to stop, and he's still relatively young.
Yeah.
He's got a good shot.
Yeah. Do you know why he's done so many movies?
I would imagine because he keeps putting himself in a situation where he needs the money.
Yes, that is true. Yeah, he went bankrupt at one point and needed money, so he started doing anything he could. And
Have you seen The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent?
no, but I would like to.
It's a lot of fun, and they poke fun at you're not back because you never went anywhere.
For our listeners, if you want to listen to a great Nicolas Cage podcast, our friends do a podcast called National Treasure 2, where they listen to a Nicolas Cage movie and review it, I guess.
Sure.
So listen to a Nicolas Cage, watch a Nicolas Cage movie with their eyeballs,
Sure.
and then review it. So
Okay. Now, do we get to overlay the episode with the film where they're actually just giving us like a MST3K soundtrack overlay, or
no, it's just audio.
okay,
The podcast is just audio, but the hosts watch it with their eyeballs
but during the podcast or before?
before.
Okay.
Yeah. So
It's important
yes,
detail.
Yeah.
The 1973 movie is considered one of the greatest films of Great Britain. And I even saw a review that called it the Citizen Kane of horror movies. Citizen Kane being a movie that doesn't hold up very well as great cinema today, but at the time, it basically set the precedent for everything we love about film now. So it was great when it was new.
Nice.
Yeah. So what I love about this film, and I hate it at the same time, that it shows this story that makes the Christians who want to be afraid of non-Christians, shows them a really good reason to hold on to that. Pagans like human sacrifice. It can't be trusted ever. They're going to lie to you to get what they're after. And what they're after is human sacrifice.
We're going to see a lot of human sacrifice in our upcoming movies from the pagans. So I guess it's a real fear for some people.
Mm-hmm. I mean, if you want to tell a horror story, if the worst thing your cult is doing is stealing books out of people's mailboxes, that's annoying for a lot of people. It's not the kind of thing that causes terror.
Fair enough. So from a book called Ritual to a movie called The Ritual.
An important difference.
An important difference. But this movie, The Ritual, is based on a book of the same name, but not The Ritual from the Wicker Man.
Because that was just Ritual.
That was just Ritual. So, The Ritual. We should link all the IMDb pages for these movies.
For sure.
The Ritual is a 2017 film directed by David Bruckner, and it's based on a novel of the same name, as I said, by Adam Neville. So the premise of this movie, Preston, is that a group of friends decide to go hiking in Scandinavia and end up taking a shortcut through the forest after one of them injures their knee. So they're trying to cut the time off their hike so he can get...
That makes sense when you're injured, but shortcuts when hiking, that increases the risk a lot already.
And in horror movies, a shortcut is a bad idea.
Yeah, but you never know you're in a horror movie until you know you're in the thick of a horror movie.
Right. So in the forest, they come across a gutted elk surrounded by pagan runes. The runes are all carved into the tree. That evening, a rainstorm forces them to shelter in a conveniently found abandoned cabin. They find an abandoned cabin in the woods.
So this feels a little bit like Hansel and Gretel.
A little bit. That's actually really good.
We found ourselves a cabin. What could go wrong?
In said cabin, they find an effigy, and the effigy is beheaded. It has like little twigs for arms. It's very creepy.
A little Wicker Man.
Yeah, and they found more of the runes that were carved into trees inside the cabin.
Sure.
As the movie progresses with more creepy things, they learn that the forest is home to a Jotun.
A giant.
A giant.
Jotun.
Jotun,
Yeah,
that's
okay.
it. Jotun. Named Moder. Moder. So,
Moder.
Moder.
I like motor.
I like Moder.
It's
Jotun.
probably
Moder.
not right, but I like it.
Well, this is what happens when I only read things. And
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
So you'll remember from our Norse mythology episode that the Jotun are being separate from the Aesir and the Vanir, but they have similar powers to the gods.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is translated as giant. There's some debate on how accurate that is.
Right.
In this movie, which I didn't like, Moder is apparently the child of Loki. So that was a little odd, but heavy in Norse mythology. The film depicts human sacrifice as worship to the Jotun and uses the ancient mythology to give this sense of inevitability.
Okay. Fun.
Not for them.
You know, just go hiking in Scandinavia and find out, oh, this mythology is still very important to people.
Yeah.
Fun.
But mildly incorrect. I feel like they probably picked Loki because of Marvel.
It's possible they picked Loki because of Marvel, or of the popular gods in Norse mythology, none of them are outright evil.
Right.
But Loki is going to be the closest just because he's a trickster. And so that seems like a pretty good reason.
But wasn't it in Marvel where they rewrote him as a Jotun?
No, he was always a frost giant.
Okay.
Well, actually, him being a frost giant might be arguable. But yeah, he was a Jotun. Yeah. The Ninth Gate. This is another one I loved growing up.
Okay.
And have shared it a few times as an adult. It doesn't get great ratings when you look it up online, but it's managed to hold on to a cult following for the last 25 years.
Okay. We have a couple movies on this list by Roman Polanski, who we do need to say is a dirtbag.
Yeah. I mean, very few people in Hollywood are actually good role models.
That's true, but he was found guilty and then ran away, so he's especially bad.
Yeah. But he helped rewrite the screenplay to closer reflect the original 1993 book that this movie is based on. And it was actually written in Spanish. It's called El Club Dumas. Dumas has nothing to do with the narrative of the film at all. But it was book collectors. I think the first book that he's after in the novel was a really rare edition of The Three Musketeers. Very forgettable. Honestly, I don't remember what the first book he was after in the movie was, if it was The Three Musketeers or not. But this window dressing, because all the rest is very satanic.
Love it.
Johnny Depp is the star of this film. And he is a dealer of rare books. He will screw anybody out of everything they have to get what he's after, just to keep his clients happy. And this reputation is not very helpful to his task of collecting an extremely rare collection of books, which are actually very, very, very important to a satanic ritual that he doesn't know anything about.
He's just meant to find the books.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in the film, he's given one book, and he's told by the guy who holds it, this is the only one in the world, but there are a couple others who claim to have the only one of this book. So I need you to go and look at them and see if their claims are reasonable. But the trick is, what the guy who originally made this commission is actually looking to steal pages from the other books to get a complete set of these images that are supposed to be, what's the word I'm looking for?
Like a triptych?
Kind of. The engravings in these books. There's 9 engravings. 3 in each book, it turns out later on, were engraved by what claims to be Satan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so everybody wants to get all 9 of these engravings of gates. The Ninth Gate, the name of the film. So very, very culty. A lot of fun. I liked it a lot. Polanski thought the original book was funny because he doesn't care about this religious stuff. So he thought it was like creeping up on campy a little bit,
Oh, we kind of love
just
that.
because his angle on this is just a little bit weird. The movie does not come off campy or funny at all, ever, unless you have a mindset like Polanski's. And even then, I don't know if he translated it to be as funny as he wanted it to be,
I hope nobody listening has a mindset like Roman Polanski.
right? Depp played his character more flat than Polanski wanted, but he never told him to change it either. He just, this actually works.
Okay.
So the film illustrates the belief that occult power rests in art, and that old books and sages can enable us to pursue and discover terrific power, which of course isn't something that Polanski believed in, but leaned hard into it for the film. The word terrific started out as basically just terrifying.
Yeah, terror.
Like horrific
yeah.
still means horrifying. Terrific.
Okay.
For until recently did mean terrifying.
It's like awesome used to just meant something that
inspired awe.
awe, as opposed to something that's like cool.
Yeah, we've overused the word
Awesome.
so much.
Yeah, nothing's actually awesome anymore. Well, I shouldn't say nothing's awesome, but we assign the label of awesome to things that are not.
A lot.
Yeah.
So it, just in the last 100 years or so, it started to shift into positivity. From terrifying through magnificent and wondrous into great and fantastic.
We should just start talking like people from the late 1800s and use words in that.
This feels very appealing, hard to commit to.
Right. And also hard to get other people on board when you're like, oh my goodness, I just watched Midsommar. It was terrific.
I think there's going to be a lot of situations where people are not going to notice that you're using the word in a different way than they're used to. That's part of how words evolve, is that sometimes, because the use might be not different than they're expecting, they won't know that you're being weird.
Oh. Wow. Well, we'll see what I can do.
But tell me more about this Midsommar.
Midsommar is actually one movie I think I'll have to pull. I know it's gory, but I'm going to have to pull. It's intrigued me for a very long time.
Okay.
It is a Midsommar. It's a 2019 film directed by Ari Aster and starring Florence Pugh.
Is that how you say her name?
Pugh, yeah.
Okay.
How would you say it?
I'm not sure.
We're going to say Puff?
I mean,
like
the GH on the end, there's so many different ways people have used it. It could be Pew, it could be Puff, it could be Pug. I don't know. It seems wrong. I'm 95%
sure it's Pugh.
Okay.
It is a great representation of how people are lured into cults. Danny, played by Florence Pugh, experiences a traumatic incident with her family. I won't spoil it. And is in a strained relationship with her boyfriend, Christian. Christian and Danny are invited to a midsummer festival in Sweden by some friends, and this festival only occurs every 90 years.
This can't be much of a tradition if everybody who's gone to it has never been to one before.
Well, there's going to be reasons why it doesn't happen very often, because
it's horrifying.
Because it's horrifying. So they do lots of psychedelic drugs and watch some disturbing rituals and participate in some disturbing rituals.
Okay.
From a cult perspective, this movie focuses on how people deal with grief and isolation. After her family tragedy, she's looking for connection and becomes part of this community in Sweden.
It's nice to find community.
Well, and Brant and I were watching a different cult documentary last night on a real cult. And yeah, we've talked about this before. They look for people who are normally healthy that are going through something hard.
Mm-hmm.
So this is perfect. So in Midsommar, the Harga are the cultists. But the town, this is a fun fact, the town of Harga is actually a real place in Sweden with its own creepy folk song. In the song, the devil visits Harga and lures the villagers away. In like the description I saw was like a Pied Piper-esque fashion. One of the rituals that Danny and her boyfriend and their friends experience is Atestupa. And
so I've watched the Norseman on Netflix a little bit, and one of the first things you hear at the beginning of the show is about the Ettenstup, which sounds very similar to this, where people jump from a cliff
Yeah.
to stop being a burden to their family.
100%. That's exactly what this is.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's the first thing she witnesses when she gets to this summer festival in Sweden. It's a couple old people jumping off a cliff to kill themselves.
That feels like it should be a turnoff.
Yeah, I mean, that would be something where I'd be like, I'm really good. Thank you for having me. I'm going to go.
Okay.
This is not what I thought a festival would be.
Right.
I want like sausages and some live music.
Sure.
That's what,
That's the festival I'm used to.
that's the festival I'm used to. All the festivals have some sort of meat and music.
Okay.
Anyway, and so some scholars believe this ritual of Adastupa is based in fact. There's no concrete proof, but obviously there's enough tellings and retellings of it.
Right. Because it's the honorable way to
Well,
go.
I mean, again, Norse mythology, apparently everyone thinks it's really creepy. The only honorable way to die is in battle. And so if you're 90 and you can't fight and you're using up resources of what I imagine would be of relatively nomadic peoples at the time.
Probably, yeah.
That's tough.
Yeah, they weren't even very industrial. They just stole stuff.
Yeah. So, yeah, and there's other rituals that are based in actual Swedish rituals. The killing people and wearing them as a skin suit, not so much.
Yeah, that's gross.
Yeah. So again, human sacrifice is a theme in this, and yeah, I'm very intrigued by it because it is very like bright colors and very different from your average horror film. But I know it's gory, so that's why I haven't pulled the trigger yet.
So there is a form of human sacrifice that I've read up on a little bit that is probably legit in the Scandinavian tradition. It connects to the whole god of the gallows thing for Odin. That you got 4 people carrying somebody to the gallows. That's your 8-legged horse Sleipnir. To sacrifice, to offer this criminal, usually, where he would be hanged for the betterment of the community, which is technically a sacrifice.
Yeah. I think if there's appeasing of a higher power, then you can call it a sacrifice.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, there's betterment of the community. If he's a criminal, capital punishment. I mean, that's a whole different argument, but
there's a lot of interesting ideas surrounding capital punishment that maybe we'll get into another day.
Jesus died thanks to capital punishment.
Yeah.
We could do a whole episode on.
All right. Next on our list is The Village.
Yay, the one I've watched.
I'm glad you've watched this one. It's a classic in a weird sort of way. It's not perfect. In fact, there are allegations that M Night Shyamalan stole some of the ideas for this film's twist from another book.
I was in junior high when this came out, and my best friend and I were like obsessed with it, mostly because we really liked Walking Phoenix before he went crazy. I mean, I'm sure it was always there, but publicly crazy. And yeah, I had a friend, because Margaret Peterson Haddix is a YA author. And so we were that age. And I had a friend who was very offended that he stole the plot. And we were like, no, it's fine.
But it's not the same story.
I haven't read the book, so I would like to, though.
I haven't read the book either, but when I found out about this allegation, I'm like, okay, what is this book about? Why is it that the allegations were made, but no follow through legally at all? What we see as the twist of this film is actually like the first chapter of this book. And it's not the same, but it's a couple of the same elements.
Okay.
I don't want to spoil the film for those who haven't seen it yet, because I really enjoyed this film.
Yeah, I did too.
And some people compare it to Plato's Allegory of the Cave too, where you've got this group of people who are stuck in their situation. They're not supposed to go into the forest or the towns beyond the forest. There's creatures that keep you there. The film feels culty, but there's not a whole lot of religious overtones in this film.
Yeah, I actually thought it was really interesting that you added it to your list, because I wouldn't inherently think of it as a cult film, but there is a leader.
Yeah.
And
it's fairly totalitarian.
Yeah, and they have been indoctrinated.
Yeah. And there's a church there, and so the person who's in charge of that is part of this council of leaders. They are the decision makers. It's a little culty, but not like worship me culty. It's super weird, and I love it.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad you added it because again, I wouldn't inherently have thought of it as a culty movie.
Think of the things that are on our list so far. I actually started by Googling culty movies to get me started on this list. And I had a couple that come to mind. The first to come to mind was The Wicker Man. Not on the list. The Village, not on the list. Maybe for a good reason. Wicker Man, I feel definitely belongs on the list,
See,
though.
I Googled and then I got in trouble because I Googled cult movies and then it started talking about like cult classics, which is where I was
Right.
like, that is a great name for this. But I was like, Rocky Horror Picture Show. I was like, no, I get that's a cult classic, but that's not a cult movie.
Right.
Movies about cults. This movie is a cult following. I'm like, no, that's not what I want. Anyway.
Yeah, you got to teach Google what it is you mean. Yeah, a lot of fun when you can separate yourself from what is actually really quite horrifying in this film. We've got monsters that turn out to be people in costumes. It's not a supernatural film at all, though it feels for the first half like maybe it is.
Yeah.
And it's all about control.
Yep. Yep.
And so, like the book that has been allegedly the inspiration for the film, the things that people will do to control other people and to maintain that control are pretty horrifying.
Yep.
People die. The Naughties were a good decade.
Maybe it was because we were like the perfect age, you know.
Oh, yeah, that's fair.
We're a bit nostalgic about it. Is the issue.
Nothing compares to the years you were in high school.
Right? And we're millennials. So like I still had a flip phone then. Like I couldn't just watch literally whatever I wanted on the internet.
Right? When you
So
accidentally hit the internet button, you're like, close before
Right.
it charges me.
Yeah. And so going to movies was like still the thing you did with your friends.
Right.
So
Nothing compares with the music when you were in high school.
Right.
Yeah.
we've just dated ourselves considerably, but it's fine. My best friend and I dressed up as people from the village one year for Halloween.
Nice.
Yeah. We got like these old pioneer dresses and we had I don't even remember. We had someone make us the yellow cloaks and
Nice.
yep. And nobody knew who we were, but we loved them.
That's fair.
Anyway. Our next film is Apostle. Sounds pretty religious.
It does.
It is directed by Gareth Evans. It is a 2018 film that takes place in 1905 Wales.
Ooh.
Our protagonist, Thomas, has his sister kidnapped by a cult.
Oh, no.
Good start.
Yeah.
So to get her back, Thomas poses as a convert to infiltrate, rescue her.
Sure.
The cult participates in the worship of an unnamed goddess. They just call her she.
Okay.
Or her, whatever.
Okay. All pronouns, no names.
All pronouns, no names. But
Gotcha.
they are scenes where the leader is reading from a religious book called the Book of Therese.
Okay.
Therese. And in my analysis of this movie, people were saying that refers to potentially fertility goddesses and things like that.
Okay.
She is most likely based heavily on Dawn, the Celtic fertility goddess. Dawn is sometimes put in a tripartite with Morrigan.
Okay.
So they're like describing that, you know, she can be an old crone or a crow. And I was like, that's Morrigan. And then they said it's Dawn and because it's fertility as opposed to whatever. And I was like, that's the tripartite that she shows up in.
Sure.
I just recently transcribed both of these episodes, the Celtic and the Norse one. So this is very fresh for me.
Sure.
So the leader of the cult, Malcolm, claims that the barren Welsh island remains fertile only through blood sacrifice.
Well, yeah. Little rocky spot. Sure.
And
make it all better.
And basically, they can't afford a bunch of livestock for continuous animal sacrifices. So they hold people ransom to raise money.
So not a Wicker Man situation.
I mean, this does eventually turn into that
Oh,
option.
okay, good.
But not their initial intent.
Okay.
They just actually need money.
Sure. I mean, the economy.
In 1905. Barren Welsh Island. Yeah, I get it.
Sure. And look at Wales today.
Still barren. Sheep outnumber humans 3-1. So that's a lot of blood sacrifice if you've run out of sheep.
Right?
That's a lot of blood sacrifice if you've run out of sheep.
Yeah, that's wild.
And you know what they say about the Welsh?
And the sheep?
And the sheep. Just leave it at that.
Another film that I absolutely love. 2007's The Mist.
Ooh.
Directed by Frank Darabont, based on Stephen King's 1980 novella. I haven't read the novella, though short enough I probably could.
Brian, my husband / our sound guy, saw this in the notes. He was like, Stephen King! Immediately. He probably doesn't even know there is a movie, but he was very excited by the Stephen King part of it.
The Mist is a great film.
Okay.
I love it. There's a reason it got picked up to be a TV show on Spike 2017. I haven't seen it yet. I would imagine that it plays up even more the good bits that I want to talk about today.
Well,
so it is a monster movie, primarily. There's this mist that rolls into town. In the mist is monsters and terrible, terrible creatures that just eat people and really ruin people's day. So the film focuses on a handful of people who are lucky enough to be locked in a grocery store. So they've got food and they've got people who panic in situations like this. The film and the series, like King's novella, explore how people behave in extreme circumstances. The TV show, I'm told, focuses on a lot of weird kind of blessings that come to people when they respond well to these extreme circumstances, as well as terrible destruction that comes to these people who don't respond well.
Interesting.
Yeah. I will say that the film is well classified as a tragedy.
Okay.
Not a whole lot of positivity in the film, but it's really, really great that the way it depicts this panic that people have. There's one lady in particular in the grocery store who is sure that all of this badness is God's judgment coming down on them. There's the military, they've been testing nearby, and God condemns them for that. And so now we have to sacrifice people for this expiation to be forgiven by God for all this bad things, and maybe the fog will go away. And this gets expanded a little bit further in the TV show as well. So, a lot of fun.
It sounds really interesting. I will say, researching all of these, I actually want to watch horror films.
Yeah.
I just need a minder for the gore.
That's fair.
I always, need a minder. Or you can tell me after we've gone through all of them which ones are actually gory.
So The Mist isn't very gory.
Okay.
There's some gore, but not lots.
Okay.
So I think that it'll be all right for you.
Okay.
But really great. The main lady who is super vocal about this is God's condemnation for us all. We need to make a sacrifice for expiation and all that. She plays it so well. You hate her throughout this film.
Good.
Yeah.
I don't know why it really reminds me. I hate to be this person. It reminds me of Snowpiercer.
I haven't seen Snowpiercer yet. I need to get on it.
It
looks so
quite
cool.
Good. I'm working my way through the Chris Evans filmography,
Mm-hmm.
and he's had some good ones, and he's had some major duds.
Sure.
But what that reminds me of is Chris Evans is in Snowpiercer, but he plays opposite Tilda Swinton.
Okay.
And she plays her character. It's not a funny movie at all. But she plays this like borderline comedic character Like, she's ridiculous, but she's not funny, but she's almost clownish.
Okay.
And I'm always so impressed by how she toes that line. And that's what that reminds me of.
Sure.
Where you're like just such a good actor, where you're like, anyone else doing that would have wrecked the movie.
Sure.
And she just plays it so well.
So it brings to mind Wyatt Russell. Think of Chris
Oh, yeah,
Evans.
yeah.
He plays the new Captain America in Captain.
Looking good, John.
He's a great actor, at
Phenomenal.
least in this role. I
He
can't say
was-
I've seen him in lots of other
He was
things.
getting Under the Banner of Heaven.
Okay, I haven't seen that one, but I hear it's good. Maybe I probably should watch
You probably should.
it.
There's a few reasons you should watch
Yeah.
it. But
But like he got so much hate mail
I
for
believe it.
playing this new Captain America figure so well that you had to hate the character.
yeah. Yeah.
I love it when that happens,
I do too.
except for the hate mail. I feel bad for them for
Seriously, I
that.
forget the actress's name. Same thing.
No.
She got a lot of hate for playing Seriously. But
Oh wow.
anyway, this is another Roman Polanski film, Rosemary's Baby. I'm surprised you haven't seen it. I feel like we should watch this one together.
I've heard of it. I mean, it comes up kind of a lot.
It comes up a lot around Halloween, especially.
Sure.
I'm quite intrigued by watching this because it's older. I don't think it'll be like bad gory.
Probably.
It'll be old gory,
Right,
you know, if it's
yeah.
gory at all. It's based on the novel by Ira Levin. I don't know if I said, sorry, 1968 is when the film came out. It features Satanism and the occult.
Ooh, spooky.
Spooky. So Rosemary and her husband Guy move into the Bramford building in New York City, which is infamous for strange occurrences. Dead babies, cannibalism, suicides, witchcraft, and the summoning of the devil. Just to name a few things that have happened in this building.
All right.
So the movie touches on religion from the very beginning, with Rosemary discussing her Catholic upbringing and a discussion of the Pope's recent travels. There's all this underlying, particularly Catholicism, in the movie.
You know what I never find myself talking about? Where the Pope has been lately.
If he's been nearby, we talked about it briefly when he
we
visited
we
Canada.
talked about when he came here,
Yeah.
but like
So maybe I haven't seen Rosemary, but maybe he was recently in or around New York City.
maybe.
Guy, the husband, becomes friendly with their neighbors, the Castanets, who end up being part of a satanic cult.
Oh, good neighbors to have.
After being drugged, Rosemary unwillingly becomes part of a satanic ritual where she is impregnated by Satan himself.
Oh,
Apparently, this is an SA scene, so I don't know how graphic it is, but
okay.
just so everyone knows, trigger warning. During the scene, apparently, because I don't watch horror, there's a lot of imagery from Catholicism, including the Sistine Chapels, which depicts multiple biblical events.
Mhm.
It also depicts the fall, Lucifer's fall,
Mhm.
is one of the things. So,
And everybody's not wearing pants. Sistine Chapel's got no pants.
no pants, lots of peen. Yeah, I don't want to spoil the ending.
Okay.
So I feel like I'll just leave it there.
It sounds a lot, and this is prediction, based on the title and what you've given me, that Rosemary's gonna have a baby, and it's not gonna look at all like a human would expect.
It doesn't look like Guy. We'll just put it
Sure.
that way. Rosemary pulled a Mary, but like,
With the wrong team.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
yeah. So, yeah. So obviously, this again plays into the idea of Satanism and the occult. And you know what I thought a lot of writing this episode?
Mm-hmm.
Our good friend Glenn Farron.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember what episode he did with us, but Rosemary's Baby in particular, though the other movies can touch on this, is remember he said Satanism wouldn't exist without Christianity.
Right.
It
Yeah.
filled the gaps that Christianity left. And that's what I really thought about when reading through the synopsis of Rosemary's Baby and the religious undertones.
Sure. I don't remember reading up on any religion anywhere else that is a direct counter to an existing religion.
Yeah.
What we see in the Sikh tradition is that it's more of an amalgamation and kind of figuring out how the world can work with both of these ideas of Islam and the
Hinduism.
Hindu collection of
Yeah, it was
philosophies
just
and
something that
ideas.
came from, in this case, two other existing ones, and everything else came from one other existing one.
Mostly, usually, yeah. And this is antagonism.
Yeah. I'm gonna add a bonus ninth film
Do it.
that's only sort of based on cult.
Okay, what do you got?
We should do a movie night on this one. I actually really enjoyed it. Back to our nostalgia.
Mm-hmm.
2 nights ago, I watched 2004's Saved with Mandy Moore.
Okay.
And it was just like kind of cute and heartwarming, but it was also really mind blowing from like predicting the future.
Okay.
Like watching it 20 years later. So the premise is that there's a bunch of girls and they go to a Christian school
Mm-hmm.
and they love Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we all know. We all went to school with those girls. Love Jesus. And one of the girls, Jenna Malone, her boyfriend comes out to her as gay. And so she feels called by Jesus to have sex with him to make him not gay. Well, she gets pregnant and her boyfriend's still gay. And so the movie follows her year of pregnancy in high school. And Mandy Moore's character is just the worst person you've ever met in the entire world.
Sure.
You know, the Christian who weaponizes Christianity.
Yeah.
And so it's really interesting watching, like, it definitely is a commentary on what will become Christian nationalism 20 years later.
Of course.
And so it's really kind of weird to watch it. I'd never seen it before. It's been on my to watch list for a long time though. To see something prophetic and a little bit culty, I guess.
Sure.
So I'm going to throw it on this list, not a horror film. But yeah, they're very much like, you're the out group, you're the out group, you're the out group throughout. So like Mandy Moore's brother's disabled, and then there's a pregnant lady, and there's a gay guy, and they just, you know, keeping the flock out.
Nice.
So it is heartwarming. It ends well, but there's my bonus 9 cult movie.
I've got another because I also need a
Okay.
non-horror film
Okay.
to add to this list. So Marvel's Runaways
Oh,
is actually a entertaining enough TV show that doesn't get a whole lot of credit. It's available on Disney Plus. It was a Hulu release to begin with, I think.
weird.
Yeah, I think that's where it started, was Hulu. And it's about these kids that run away from their families who are all part of this cult. That, like, they don't really worship this guy, but they do offer sacrifices to him. So I guess worship, I've been on all sides of the argument on the use of worship.
I know you have. I was going to say, where's this going to go?
I guess it's fair to say they worship him. They don't love him, they fear him.
I was going to say, there's more like veneration, Preston.
They worship him, they offer him sacrifices, they are terrified of this fella. And he is an alien, which is essentially a god in all of the measurable ways that we see for Thor and Loki and everybody else in the Marvel Universe. But there is actually a church in modern day California where all this takes place that is built up around this guy. One of the main characters, her mom, is the head of this church that her dad had founded, worshiping this guy, calling him an angel.
Mm-hmm.
And so later it turns out that this one main character is actually now the daughter of this god alien figure.
Oh.
And so she's got superpowers. The rest of the team has powers of various kinds, except for one guy who is basically a really cheap Iron Man ripoff.
Oh.
But yeah, a lot of fun. And the way they develop this cult in the show is, I think, really, really interesting and a lot of fun. Seeing how people can take a real life provable thing and expand it into this larger than life cult phenomenon. And yet, not a horror. Just a fun YA romp in the Marvel Universe.
Good.
Yeah.
Well,
there's a lot of cults. We like telling stories about these people who believe weird things and are willing to do terrifying things because of them.
yep. And fictional cults are much nicer than real cults.
Because we know they're not real.
Because we know they're not real. But there are real danger cults out there, so
For sure.
protect yourself against those.
Absolutely.
Stay inside and watch these movies.
Right. And maybe that'll be enough education to keep you safe.
And listen to our podcast.
Yeah, don't stop doing that.
Don't stop doing that. How can you help us make more episodes? One, you can leave us a review on Apple. That helps us so much to be found.
Mm-hmm.
You can follow us on our social media. We have Discord, Facebook, Instagram. Our podcasts are also on YouTube. Discord is where we have really good conversations about religion, and I think I'm going to have to put a poll out about what our next movie night should be. It's been a minute. So
Yeah.
if you want to watch a movie with us, check out our Discord.
We've also got ways you can support us a little bit more directly financially. We've got a Patreon where we have exclusive episodes, expanded interviews, and Katie's Bible study. And we've also got a way for you to become ordained as a priest of the Holy Watermelon.
Amazing.
All on our Patreon. And we're also up on Spreadshop where we sell our merch. You can get our church merch.
Church merch.
And I think that's about it.
All right. Until next time.
Peace be with you.
Spiritual enlightenment and salvation for
By the late Middle Ages, the Christian prophecies had fulfilled itself.